collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, with the mainstream media only giving airtime to the 3 of the 12 presidential candidates who are backed by the big political parties, we talk to one of the independents about engaging young people to exercise their right to vote.
As an independent candidate, I want to run this. I want to show people a different path, a European, if I may say so, way of doing things. And I want to address the youth, because the young people are, for me, the future. And about 50% of persons between 18 to 25 years are not registered on the electoral roll. So that is something we need to address, because it's not automatic once you turn 18.
And despite all the spin we hear about promoting sustainable mobility, new laws have been passed in Cyprus which will discourage the use of bicycles and electric scooters.
Now the law says that Escooters can move in streets where the speed limit is up to 30 kilometers. In Cyprus, such streets are a very, very small number. Basically, a 30 kilometer speed limit is outside of schools for around 100 to 150 meters.
Earlier this week, there was an event in the centre of Nicosia by one of our presidential candidates. Now, first, before we start talking to him, I have to say that the way that the media presents our presidential candidates is somewhat skewed here in Cyprus, because the mainstream media only ever seems to consider those who are backed by the bigger parties. My next guest is not, but he has got a lot of support on the ground, particularly among young people. He joins us now. He's an old friend of the Cyprus News Digest, and that is Achilleas Dimitriadis. Achilleas, there's a party going on outside. You have definitely brought something new to electioneering in Cyprus. But let me ask you about this fact that with 12 candidates, so far it seems that most of the media are only ever reporting on the top 3. And that seems to me to be denying the electorate the chance to make informed decisions.
Well, Rosie, thank you very much for the introduction. You're absolutely right. The way we're treated in the media is not really fair. And if you look at the Cyprus Broadcasting Corporation, which set up a debate, and only 3 of the candidates were invited, and this debate was repeated 2 or 3 times, it makes you wonder, if there is airtime to repeat a debate, why couldn't we have a debate with the other candidates as well? So I don't really buy this story that there's no time. I think there is some expediency in the way this is presented, and we hope to break this in September, where the other TV stations will start some debates, and hopefully we will get some sort of discussion so that the electorate will be able to understand what each person represents and how they're going to cast their vote.
How far is this to do with the government funding that goes to political parties? Are they allowed to spend that on sponsoring television debates?
Oh, absolutely. They get about 12 million a year, and this year, in fact, I think about a month ago, there was an effort to ask for more, as if 12 million was not enough for the political parties to use. It's totally unfair, but I don't like to moan. I want to point out the issue, and I want to fight this out. As far as I'm concerned, they have an unfair advantage, but we are right and they're wrong. So, as an independent candidate, I want to run this. I want to show people a different path, a European, if I may say so, way of doing things. And I want to address the youth, because the young people are, for me, the future. And about 50% of persons between 18 to 25 years are not registered on the electoral roll. So that is something we need to address, because it's not automatic once you turn 18 that you become eligible to vote. You need to register, and a lot of these persons do not register and therefore are ineligible to vote. So we're starting a campaign for awareness for young people, where we want to point out this deficiency, and we're bringing a band. It's a band called Onirama from Greece on the 16th of September. If you present your voting booklet and you're under 30, you're allowed a free ticket. So essentially we're throwing a concert in order to increase awareness and to try and get the younger people to register on the electoral roll, so that in February they're eligible to vote. As far as spreading the message, we've got a little bus that we've actually prepared in a way that shows what we represent, and we will be going all over Cyprus. If people want to call in and say and ask for a visit, we are more than happy to do it. Every night, or virtually every night, we will try to visit a different location, and we're totally open to suggestions as to where we should take our little bus and come and give a presentation on our program.
At village coffee shops and so on?
Well, village coffee shops is the possibility. If the village coffee shops will not let us in, we will bring our own coffee and our own drink, and we will have the party in the square, and we will spread the message. And that's the motto. If they won't let us in, we will be there, and we are there for the people. We want to give voice to the people who are voiceless, and we want the young to lead this effort, because it's high time we change all the bad things that people see, and I'm sure there's a lot of those.
Right, now let's go back to that event with young people under 30. If they present a voting book, they get in free.
Right. If they don't have a voting book, we will make one for them if they sign the forms at the office on Kennedy and Esperidon, the corner of Kennedy and Esperidon. Whoever brings in the forms that are signed, we undertake to issue the book, the voting booklet for them for free.
Are you allowed to do that?
Yes, we are, because we're simply doing the donkey work. They've signed the forms. We will take the forms to the relevant department of the government, and after a few days they get registered. Everybody does that. It's just that 50% of these younger people, 18 to 25, do not register. And
which is an indictment of our political system, and the fact that particularly the future generations seem to have no confidence whatsoever in
totally.
our politicians.
Absolutely, and not without reason. I cannot understand, if you have to go to the army at age 18 and the little piece of paper turns up at your home, I can't see why you can be automatically registered on the electoral roll without having to make an application.
I have put that point many times
Right.
to the Deputy Ministry of Innovation, and they say they're working on it. But I mean, it
they
should
better
just,
hurry up,
it
because
just should be logical, shouldn't it, that you turn 18, you're going in the army, you're also getting a voting booklet.
well, you're old enough to fight, but not enough to vote. That's
You're
the
old
question.
enough to die, but not enough to vote.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. We haven't time for more, but our pleasure talking to presidential candidate Achilleas Dimitriades, and we will come back to him, be sure, before those elections.
Listen online to the Cyprus News Digest on YouTube or at cyprusmail.libsyn.com. The latest program is uploaded every Friday, and if you missed one, you can catch up there.
Our Parliament has recently passed a bill that aims to restrict who can use electric scooters, and indeed to make helmets for cyclists compulsory. Now, we've talked about this before on the programme because there are pros and cons to this. So it's a welcome back to Iasonas Senekis, who is a researcher on road safety at the European University. Iasonas, first and foremost, let's talk, if we may, about this business of helmets for cyclists, because we did discuss this before, and I recall that you said it should not be compulsory, and now they've made it compulsory. What are your thoughts?
Thank you for the invitation, Rosie. As you said, we have discussed it a couple of months ago when the Parliament presented their intentions in making helmets for bicyclists compulsory. The thing is that we have a feeling that the government, along with some MPs from other parties are trying to pass the responsibility for road safety and the road network problems that we have in Cyprus to the users. So basically they have now passed a law where the helmet will be compulsory for cyclists, and if not, if they don't use a helmet, they will be fined by the police, basically with a fine of 50 euros. The issue now is that this causes a lot of problems in cycling in general, because one of the first things that we can think of is bike sharing. Bike sharing is one of the most used ways of transport in other cities around the world. So now, in order to rent a bicycle, you have to carry your own helmet, and if you don't, then the companies will have basically helmets that everyone can use along with the bicycles, which is, as you can see, as everyone can think of, there are hygiene problems. I mean, it wouldn't be the best thing around to use a helmet that someone else was using 10 minutes, 1 hour, 30 minutes ago. So this is basically causing problems in how cycling can become an alternate way of transport in our cities. And of course, in order to move around with a bicycle anywhere now, you have to have a helmet with you. The problem is not helmet use. Of course, helmets do protect under specific circumstances, under specific speeds and crash types. The problem is that instead of focusing on educating, on creating safe infrastructure, on telling people how a helmet protects and what kind of protection it offers, they decided to create another legal issue, another law, and they will now ask the police to chase cyclists and give out fines for not using a helmet.
Right, there are two things that spring to mind from what you've just said. Let's start with this business of the bikes that you see dotted around all our towns now, and particularly our tourist areas, so that people don't take taxis or hire cars. We're trying, I thought, to be leaders in sustainable mobility. Now, if I'm a tourist coming on holiday, I'm hardly going to pack a cycling helmet with me, am I? And I don't really understand, unless you've spoken to the bicycle hire people, how they are going to put a helmet on each bike that isn't going to get pinched.
Yeah, basically the issue here is that bicycles can replace short trips. So we can use them for the last mile, as discussed in other countries, or you can even use them for short distances, let's say up to 5 kilometers around cities. And of course, this is very useful for tourists because they can use the bike and move around in Nicosia and Larnaca and Limassol or whatever. So the issue here, even if the companies find a way, I mean, they can use a box that can be unlocked through the application. I mean, there are ways to do it. There is the technology to use it. But, looking around online and basically solutions that are available, the issues with hygiene and, let's say the using helmets from different people all around the day is a problem. And it's not the best way to do it.
Can I also ask you, how important is it to have a cycle helmet that fits properly?
Yeah, that's another issue. That comes back to the education and the campaigns that should have been done before trying to change the law. And in order to promote cycling, people should know how they use a helmet, what kind of helmet they can use, what's their size, what's the type of protection it offers. So these are all issues that are not addressed by changing the law and adding a fine to penalize bicycle users, instead of giving them the benefit of using a bicycle instead of a car or another means of transport that is causing traffic, is causing CO2 emissions, we're trying to penalize these users and trying to find ways to blame them in case something happens. And we see that a lot because every time we have a crash where a cyclist is injured or even killed, we see in the press that the description mentions that he was wearing, let's say, dark clothing, or he was not properly using a helmet, or he didn't have the required lights in the front and back of the bicycle. So basically, it all comes back to victim blaming, and it all comes back to blaming the users instead of trying to fix things, instead of trying to create safe infrastructure. Because if there was safe infrastructure, then cyclists would not be in the streets with cars and vans and trucks all around. They would use the safe cycle lanes to move around, and we wouldn't have any issues with safety. And at that point, if they had the safe infrastructure to use, it would be their decision if they felt safe or not in order to use a helmet. So now we will have cycle lanes, a small number of cycle lanes we have, and you would force people to use helmets even if it's safe, because it is safe if they're separated and they're not on the street with cars passing next to them at 60, 70 kilometers an hour. It's safe.
The other thing that occurs to me is the fact that an awful lot of bicycles that we see around and about our towns are used by asylum seekers and refugees who cannot often afford the bus, and I'm wondering whether they can afford whatever it costs to buy a bike helmet. They certainly can't afford regularly being fined €50.
Yes, that's correct. And I think we will end up with people using very cheap helmets in order to avoid getting fined instead of using it to be safe. And this comes back again to education and to campaigning about helmet use and road safety. This is what the law does. This is what our problem is. We're not against using a helmet. We are against making it compulsory and chasing people for not wearing one. Because at that point, now we know that people will just buy a helmet, a cheap one, they just put it on their heads and know that they're not going to get fined, just to go from A to B. And the problem is that there are also cases in other countries where such laws have caused specific targeting from the police to some groups of people. Because, as you said, most of the bicycle users are people who can't afford a car or a motorcycle or a bus. So they use their bicycle to move from work to home. And I think they will be the ones targeted and mostly fined by the police.
Now let's talk about scooters. E-scooters, we've seen them multiplying like crazy on our roads. I have to say that they're quite off-putting if you're driving a car because they whiz along, so perhaps there does need to be some sort of rule for them to obey. But am I right in thinking that this same law said they can't go on roads where there's a speed limit in town, let's say of 50 kilometres an hour?
That's what the law says. Basically, the 50 kilometers per hour is the standard limit in residential areas in Cyprus. So if you don't see another sign saying a different speed, the speed limit is 50 kilometers. And that's the case in basically all neighborhoods, in all our streets around Nicosia, around Cyprus, where we have residential areas. Now the law says that e-scooters can move in streets where the speed limit is up to 30 kilometers. In Cyprus, such streets are a very, very small number.
I can't remember, sorry, Yasonas, I can't remember ever seeing a 30 kilometre speed limit in a town.
Basically, a 30 kilometre speed limit is outside of schools for around 100 to 150 meters. And wherever we have 30 kilometer speed limit, we also have speed humps. So that's the way to manage and impose that speed limit to this specific area so that we don't have drivers exceeding the speed limit, because that specific areas, it's dangerous to drive at a higher speed. So this issue, the speed humps and the very short streets with the specific speed limits is a problem for e-scooters. E-scooters cannot move on these specific streets because of the speed hump and because of the small distance. After the 100 or 150 meters, they will have to carry them because they cannot use them on the street once the speed limit changes to 50 kilometers.
Who on earth thought this up? From what you've just said, if I've got an e-scooter and I want to ride it, the best place to do it is up and down outside the school gates.
Yeah, and then you have to use it on the pavement, which is illegal. I don't know whoever thought of that. Unfortunately, as we said many times, the discussion between, let's say, the government authorities, the ministry and the parliament does not include local experts, professionals, academics. So we didn't have the chance to express our ideas and propose some solutions. Some changes were done in the law during the last couple of weeks before it was voted, even though the actual law was drafted 2 years ago, and they said that they would accept ideas and proposals from the public. They didn't change anything for 2 years, and they changed the maximum speed, which was 50, which the initial maximum speed was 15 kilometers per hour. They changed it to 20. They allowed this the movement on public streets with speed limits less than 30 kilometers per hour. And I think at the last minute, during the parliament voting, they added that users must use high-vis vests or bracelets or something during the night, which is basically another responsibility of the user that doesn't really offer any protection. Instead of changing and allowing e-scooters moving safely around the city, we add more measures to the users and more fines if they don't do it right.
Okay, but they are allowed to use bicycle paths, aren't they?
Yes, they are allowed to use bicycle paths wherever there is a bicycle path. And as you can understand, e-scooters are not the same as bicycles. So if these bicycle paths are not paved correctly, it will not be easy for an e-scooter to move in this cycle path. And also the law says that local authorities, local municipalities can allow e-scooters to move in squares, in public squares, or pedestrian areas. But this is up to the local municipality.
That's ridiculous, because it means that in one municipality, how many Nicosia municipalities have we got? If I'm going on my e-scooter from one municipality to the other, and one of them has said, yes, it's all right to do this on the sidewalk, and the next one says, no, you can't actually go anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. These are the problems with the law that could have been solved before it was voted for. But as I said, the discussion was not complete, and unfortunately, these are things that we're going to face when the law is implemented in the next month. And also, there was an addition to the restriction of speed. So once municipalities allow e-scooters to move in squares or pedestrian areas, then the maximum speed comes down to 10 kilometers per hour, which there is no way to check and impose that speed limit. So e-scooters will be moving around pedestrians with 20-25 kilometers per hour. We don't have the technology at the moment to do it, and of course, we cannot expect local traffic wardens or even the police checking the speed of e-scooters. These are things that are out of reality. I cannot think of a way of how this law will be implemented.
How on earth are these things managed in other countries?
In other countries, they are using technology to reduce speed in specific areas. So once you use an e-scooter and you enter, let's say, a pedestrian area, then using geolocation, the e-scooter reduces its maximum speed to 10 kilometers automatically. So you cannot use it. You cannot go over that speed. And also, they are allowing e-scooters to move in streets with speed limits up to 50 kilometers. But as you can understand, there is safe infrastructure. There is safer infrastructure in other countries than in Cyprus. So it's much easier for people to use them. It's much safer for people to use them, and it's also much safer for cars to, understand that other vehicles and other ways of transport are present in the city than cars. So it's a whole strategy that needs to be implemented. And what I heard during the parliamentary voting is that they said that these e-scooters came all of a sudden out of nowhere, which is a lie. I mean, they have been around before the two-wheeled e-scooters, we had the e-scooters with three wheels. If you remember them in Larnaca or in Ayia Napa, they used to rent these electric e-scooters that people would stand around and move in Larnaca or Ayia Napa. So e-scooters have been around for more than a decade, and especially in Cyprus, that people have been renting them for a long time. And they started discussing about such a law in 2017. So saying that these things came out of nowhere in 2022 in order to basically find an excuse for the delay of issuing and drafting a law, basically it's a problem. It's a lie, and unfortunately it was repeated during the voting in the parliament.
Well, it does seem to me that the parliament only ever seems to manage to pass things fairly quickly when they haven't really done their homework at all. And it's again a little bit ironic, isn't it, that our government says it is working as one of the leaders in this region on the environment and sustainability, and we've passed laws that are going to make it much more difficult for people to be sustainably mobile with vehicles that have either a smaller or no carbon footprint than cars. Extraordinary, if you ask me. Iasonas, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and let's see what actually happens when people start getting fined and municipalities start creating different rules for their particular area. Many thanks.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you very much.
That is Iasonas Senekis, who's a researcher on road safety at the European University.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
And in other news this week, the government is concerned about Cyprus' falling birth rate. Recent figures revealed that it's now below the population replacement rate, a bad sign for the future, and the government has decided to address this with a 16 million preschool subsidies plan announced earlier this week by the Deputy Minister for Social Welfare, Anastasia Anthousi. The plan is expected to have multiple benefits, they said, and contribute to the implementation of additional relevant policies promised by the government. However, whether or not prospective parents are going to be tempted by a carrot of free or at least subsidised nursery schools just for the first 4 years, when one considers the cost of raising a child to adulthood, remains to be seen. The government also proposes to invest some 15 million in the creation of multi-purpose centres for children up to 4 years old and for those between the ages of 6 and 13. That aims to address the problem of afternoon care because most schools finish at lunchtime. It doesn't seem that the government has considered that if schools ran all the way through the working day, then there wouldn't be a need for some of these measures. And the President is also in hot water as regards his appointment to the board of the health insurance organisation of a doctor, Petros Agathangelu, who is also the head of the Cyprus Doctors Association. A letter by opponents to his appointment says the law stipulates that no healthcare provider can participate in the board of directors of the health insurance organisation. And although Agathangelu is not himself enrolled in GESI, that's our National Health Service, as president of the Cyprus Medical Association, he has obviously interests as regards doctors, and the health insurance organisation is very much involved in doctors' remuneration, a clear conflict of interest, say the opponents to his appointment. He was initially proposed as a member of the board by the Chamber of Commerce, but with the pressure piling up, they then said that they would withdraw their suggestion of him. And just to muddy the waters more, Dr. Agathangelu himself in response said he was not willing to withdraw his name from the board. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.